For the past 15 years, Professor Milgram has been studying the nature of obedience.
When I learn of incidents such as the massacre of civilians at My Lai, or the destruction of millions of men, women, and children perpetrated by the Nazis in World War II, I don't think of these as impersonal historical happenings. Rather, I see them as real events mediated by human beings just like you and me. How is it possible, I ask myself, that ordinary people, who are courteous and decent in everyday life, can act callously, inhumanely, without any limitations of conscience? Consider that in 1944, in the town of Oradour in France, all of the residents of the town were taken into the village church. The church was doused with gasoline. It was ignited and everyone was killed. Another tragedy, you say, another newspaper headline. But it's more than that, isn't it? They were real people who actually carried the gasoline to the church. A real person ignited it. What is there in human nature that allows an individual to act without any restraints whatsoever, so that he can act inhumanely, harshly, severely, and in no way limited by feelings of compassion or conscience? These are questions that concern me. They've concerned philosophers and moralists too for many centuries. Philosophers have said that it's a matter of the competing obligations of the individual in relation to the state and to his own conscience. Moralists take a critical attitude. They say, well, this is something that oughtn't to be done. But I'm not satisfied with these answers. I want to know what implication they have for the nature of human nature. Now, there are some studies in my discipline, social psychology, that seem to provide a clue to this question. For example, a study by Professor Solomon E. Ash, in which he tried to understand under what conditions an individual would abdicate individual judgment in the face of social pressure.
Okay, please follow me.
This is a reconstruction of Ash's experiment, designed to see whether a group can influence a person to deny the evidence of his very eyes. Unknown to the other person, all the participants are confederates of the experimenter, with the exception of the person himself, who is being tested to see if he will conform.
The experiment you will be taking part in today involves the perception of line length. Your task will be simply to look at the line here on the left and indicate which of the three lines on the right is equal to it in length. So, for example, if you think the correct answer is number 1, you simply indicate that by stating 1. If you think the correct answer is 2, simply indicate that by saying the number 2. Why don't we proceed in the following manner? You'll give your answers first, you'll be second, you'll be third, and so on. Okay, let's begin with the first set of lines. Please begin.
3. 3. 3. 3.
3. And
1. 1.
1.
1.
1.
1. 1.
1.
2.
1.
3. 3. 3. 3.
3.
In over a third of the trials, the subjects tested denied the evidence of their eyes.
1.
1.
In 1960, I came to Yale University. Previously, I had been working at Princeton for Professor Ash, who was writing a book on his conformity experiments. Now, Yale was my first teaching position, but it also gave me the opportunity I wanted to pursue some research of my own. I was very impressed with Ash's experiment because it showed with a kind of stark reality the degree to which individual action could be shaped by group pressure. We had seen individuals who denied the testimony of their own senses under the pressure of groups. The problem I wanted to study was a little different. It went a little bit further. It was the issue of authority, the degree to which a person would go along with authority, and particularly a malevolent authority. Under what conditions would a person obey authority who commanded actions that went against conscience? These are exactly the questions that I wanted to investigate at Yale University. And I went to Lindsley Chittenden Hall to find an answer to these problems. In order to study this problem, I thought it would be a good idea to bring subjects into a laboratory. And this is a reconstruction of the lab we had at Yale, with its experimenter's table, impressive apparatus, and so forth. The main idea would be to create a situation in which a person was told to act with increasing severity against another individual, and to see when he would turn to the experimenter and say, "No, I won't do this anymore." The first technical need of the experiment was to bring subjects into the laboratory. And we did this by placing an advertisement in a local newspaper. We asked subjects to take part in a study of memory and learning. A lot of people responded, and then we made specific appointments with them by telephone, asking them to show up at the laboratory at Yale University. Now imagine you had answered the advertisement and are arriving at the university at the time arranged. First, you are greeted by a man in a gray technician's coat, and he introduces you to a second volunteer and says you are both about to take part in a scientific experiment. He says it's to test whether the use of punishment improves the ability to learn. You draw lots to see who is to be the teacher and who the learner. The experiment was filmed with a hidden camera while it happened.
Would you open those and tell me which of you is which, please? Teacher. Learner. Teacher. All right, now the next thing we'll have to do is set the learner up so that he can get some sort of punishment. So, learner, would you step
Now you see the learner strapped into a chair, and electrodes are placed on his wrist. The experimenter says when he makes a mistake in the lesson, his punishment will be an electric shock.
And this electrode paste is to provide a good contact to avoid any blister or burn. Do you have any questions now before we go into the next room?
No, but I think I should say this. About 2 years ago, I was in the Veterans Hospital in West Haven.
Mm-hmm.
And while there, they detected a heart condition. There's nothing serious. But as long as I'm having these shocks, how strong are they? How dangerous are they?
Well, no, although they may be painful, they're not dangerous. Mm-hmm. Anything else?
No, that's all.
All right, teacher, would you take the test and be seated in front of the shock generator, please, in the next room?
Now, as teacher, you are seated in front of this impressive-looking instrument, the shock generator. Its essential feature is a line of switches that goes from 15 volts to 450 volts, and a set of verbal designations that goes from slight shock to moderate shock, strong shock, very strong shock, intense shock, extreme intensity shock, and finally XXX, danger severe shock. Your job, the experimenter explains to you, is to teach the learner a simple word pair test. You read a list of words to him like blue girl, nice day, fat neck, and he has to indicate by means of an answer box which words were originally paired together. If he gets each answer correctly, fine, you move on to the next pair. But if he makes a mistake, you are instructed to give him an electric shock, starting with 15 volts, and you increase the shock 1 step on each error. Now the question is, how far will you proceed on the generator before you turn to the experimenter and refuse to go any further? Before carrying out the experiment, I wanted to know how people thought they would behave in this situation. And so I asked them to predict their own performance. And when people are asked to do this, they give a rather consistent answer.
Okay, well, I'd like to believe that as soon as I felt that the person was in pain, that I would probably stop. I'm a person who is in a scientific field, and therefore I don't think I have absolute faith in scientific authority. So I'd probably, after a while, become suspicious and be a little bit dubious about the whole experiment.
I would stop right here and get me out, okay? I'm not a sadist, so like I wouldn't run it up to 450 volts.
I don't think that I could go to the end.
Why not?
It's another man. I wouldn't want it done to me.
I'd back out.
But what if the experimenter said you have no choice? You must give him more powerful shocks.
If I had no more choice, I'd go to 180, but no higher. I'd definitely walk out after 180.
I'd like to think I wouldn't do it.
Why not?
Of course, you've got a choice in life to do whatever, you know, you cannot have people telling you what you can and can't do when it comes to something that vital.
Now, we posed this question to several groups, psychiatrists, psychologists, and ordinary workers. And they said virtually the same thing, that almost no one would go on to the end. The psychiatrist said, for example, that of 1,000 subjects, perhaps one would proceed to the highest level on the generator. But I'm not interested in opinions. I'm interested in how people actually behave.
Next one, short. Sentence, movie, skirt, time. Answer, please. Wrong. Under 65 volts. Time.
Let me out!
That guy's hollering in there.
Continue, please. Go on.
Well, there's a lot of them here. You know, you have a heart condition there. You want me to go?
Just continue, please.
It's interesting that although this man continuously objects to the experimenter, he continues to obey. So he's saying one thing, but his behavior is quite another thing. The two are not joined. His laughter, the laughter doesn't mean that the subject is enjoying what he's doing. Rather, it's the expression of deeply experienced anxiety, of nervous tension. Soldiers have been known to burst into laughter before going into battle.
Sharp. Axe, needle, stick, blade. Answer, please. Wrong. I'm up to 180 volts.
Please continue, teacher.
Needle, you're gonna get a shock. 180 volts.
Oh! I can't stand the pain. Let me out of
Can't stand it. I'm not gonna kill that man there. You hear him hollering?
As I said before, the shocks may be painful, but they're not
he's in
dangerous.
there hollering. He can't stand it. What if something happens to him?
The experiment requires that you continue, teacher.
Yeah, but I'm not going to get that man sick in there. I mean, he's hollering in there. You know what I mean?
Whether the learner likes it or not, we must go on until he's learned all the word
I
pairs.
refuse to take the responsibility of him getting hurt in there. He's in there hollering.
It's absolutely essential that you continue, teacher.
There's too many left here, and geez, he gets wrong here. There's too many of them left. Who's going to take the responsibility if anything happens to that gentleman?
I'm responsible for anything that happens here. Continue, please.
All right, next one, slow. Walk, dance, truck, music. Answer, please. Wrong. 195 volts. Dance.
Let me out of here. Let me out of here. Continue, please.
Now, this man is not enjoying what he's doing. He's going on, he's administering the shocks because of his relationship to the experimenter, and not because of any pleasure he gets from his actions. This is a very important point because many people misinterpret the actions of the subjects. They say that they go on because they're aggressive or sadistic. This just isn't the case. Later on, we did an experimental variation that brings out this point. The experimenter actually left the laboratory, leaving the subject alone with the victim. Thus, he had ample opportunity to gratify his impulses. But in this variation, subjects actually administer lower-level shocks than when the experimenter is present. No, it's not sadistic impulses. Rather, the subject goes on because he's locked into a situation from which he is unable to escape.